Prabhupada speaking to the devotees in Los Angeles at the end of 1968, and he's just giving them instructions on how to begin uh, full-scale deity worship with regular artis and offerings 6 times a day. And Prabhupada had to tell everybody everything. Nobody knew how to do anything. They knew how to go on Harinam, Sankirtan, which of course is the most important thing. After all, it is the Sankirtan movement. So they knew how to do that. They knew how to do so many things, but they didn't. The young, new devotees, it was only 2.5 years after ISKCON started, and there were many, many new devotees, like brand new devotees, and so they didn't know how to do anything. Even the senior disciples were only 2.5 years in the movement. So Prabhupada is teaching them how to do deity worship. Breakfast is offered to the deities a few hours after Mangalarti. Afterward, all the devotees can take the remnants of that offering as the deity's prasadam. Then another arti is performed at noon, after which the devotees take the remnants for lunch. And there are 3 other artis at 4 in the afternoon, at 7 p.m., and another at 9 p.m. Then the deities take rest. Understanding that the deity is actually the Lord and the proprietor of the temple, the devotees should serve him just as a king is served in his palace. By doing this, the devotees would naturally increase their Krishna consciousness, but it had to be done with enthusiasm. Prabhupada cautioned that if enthusiasm waned or decreased, it could turn into drudgery and become like idol worship. The disciples would be sorry they had ever begun it. So that's a very important warning, not just for the early days in ISKCON, but for now and for all time involved with doing deity worship. It has to be done with enthusiasm in the proper spirit, serving the deities like a king in his palace. And this way the devotee's Krishna consciousness will increase. It has to be done in the right spirit, in the understanding that it's Krishna, Radharani and Krishna on the altar. It's not idol worship. But Prabhupada said, not right here, but he said in another place, he said if the devotees don't have enthusiasm and just treat the deity worship as just an ordinary thing, they'll become tired of it because, I got to cook another offering, I got to offer another arti every day, I have to do this, I have to do that. It never ends, and it can turn into that if the devotees aren't uh, determined in their devotional service and strict in their behavior and philosophically educated and obedient to their spiritual master, then they can turn into, Prabhupada said, that the disciples can think, why has my spiritual master given me this burden in the neck? Those are his words. So, so it's another thing. Of course, all the devotees take the deity worship very seriously in the proper way, but it's a danger in the material world, preaching devotees people who have forgotten their devotees and are struggling coming back to pure Krishna consciousness. It's a danger that's there, something to be guarded against. Prabhupada gave the key element here is It has to be done with enthusiasm. After being instructed by Srila Prabhupada, Shilavati returned to the temple to prepare for the new worship procedure. Next Sunday, when Prabhupada visited the temple, he stood and watched Shilavati offering arti. Afterwards, when she joined the other devotees in Prabhupada's room adjacent to the temple, Prabhupada greeted her by saying, "Now we will have arti." Shilavati looked surprised. "Oh," she said, "but I just had arti." "No, you didn't," Prabhupada said. "It wasn't good?" she asked. "No, it wasn't good." Prabhupada then went into the temple and asked the devotees to bring him the various articles for offering arti. Standing before the altar, Prabhupada called out, "I want camphor." "What's camphor?" the devotees asked. "Where do we get camphor?" Someone immediately ran out to buy some. Then Prabhupada asked for flowers. Camphor is not something that most people in the United States know. No, very few people know what buy camphor or use camphor. I never knew what it was until I moved in the temple. Standing before the altar, Prabhupada called out, "Oh, I want camphor." Someone immediately ran out to buy some. Then Prabhupada asked for flowers. Item by item, the arti paraphernalia came together as Prabhupada, standing before the altar, directed the devotees to bring him each item. When everything was finally assembled, Prabhupada demonstrated how arti should be done. Then again he turned it over to Shilavati. He had shown them, and now they should continue with enthusiasm. This is another section. When Prabhupada first introduced festivals and spiritual observances for the holidays on the Vaishnava calendar, the devotees in Los Angeles were delighted. They would plan many of the Sunday festivals around a particular event. A butter churning festival commemorated Krishna's activities as a cowherd boy. The celebration of Govardhan Puja observed Krishna's pastime of lifting Govardhan Hill, and festivals observed the appearance of Lord Rama and Lord Nishinga, etc. These were not new ideas for Prabhupada, but now for the first time he had facility and enthusiastic helpers to implement them. One festival that is mentioned here is the butter churning festival. I did it once that I remember in the old temple. I was a visitor. Then they did it at the Sunday feast, and they had 5 gallons of milk in a butter churn, and during kirtan that went on, very lively, enthusiastic kirtan, it lasted for an hour, and all the devotees and all the guests and took turns churning the butter. And at the end of about an hour of kirtan, it was butter, and they served, and they had the feast, and everybody got a handful of butter on their plate as one of the preps. It was a really good festival. Everybody really. In February, on the appearance day of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, Prabhupada came to the temple and cooked potatoes and cauliflower, sweet rice. Crowded in the doorway watching, Prabhupada cooked with silent concentration, cleaning the stove and sink after each step. One day, Shilavati discovered a bud a small flower on one of the 108 rose bushes. She excitedly called some devotees to see. Soon the other bushes would bloom with flowers to offer to the deity, and the devotees knew that Prabhupada would be pleased. Shilavati speaking. Jayananda planted 108 rose bushes, and we were all very anxious for the bushes to bloom. One day I found a little rosebud, and I was really excited. It was a yellow rose. I knew from the bud that the bush was going to be yellow and would have a particular fragrance like that flower. I felt that way about our temple. Maybe there were other temples that were bigger and grander, but the essence of Srila Prabhupada's vision was expressed in that temple. Just like with the rose bush, you could tell the color and aroma of all the flowers on the bush, so from that temple we could derive the essence of this movement, what went on there. The devotees were aware that their activities were successful model beginnings of what Prabhupada would institute throughout America and the rest of the world. Tamal Krishna had organized Back to Godhead distribution so that the devotees, while out chanting in the streets, regularly sold an unprecedented 100 magazines a day. He had, in the previous pages, he had promised Prabhupada that the Los Angeles temple would take 5,000 Back to Godhead magazines a month, and Prabhupada would ask the other temples to take thousands of PTGs every month. And that way he could make an order with Dai Nippon monthly, because it had to be, they wanted at least 20,000 every month before they would even take the order. So now they were out distributing 100 magazines a day. And even with that, it's only 3,000 a month. But I'm sure Tamal Krishna and the other devotees, they found ways, I'm sure, to distribute all the Back to Godhead magazines. Vishnu Jana was wonderful, singing and playing mridanga all day long. Prabhupada said he could lead kirtan like a Gandharva, and Vishnu Jana's puppet shows and dramatic skits for the Sunday festivals were something new to ISKCON and well appreciated by the guests. They made the Sunday program not just a feast, but a festival. And now Prabhupada had introduced a higher standard of deity worship. The devotees were inspired to serve together in Prabhupada's presence, and they worked long hours together, not with an attitude of pride in their own achievement, but with an esprit de corps. They worked hard, but it was all recreation. They saw their engagements as eternal devotional service, even though performed in the temporary setting of the one-story wooden church in the metropolis of Southern California. But crucial to the success of the Los Angeles temple was Prabhupada's personal presence there. Only because he was there was everything so successful. Although the devotees only saw him once a week, they knew he was at his apartment on Hayworth Street, and they would soon see him again. The devotees are inspired to serve together in Prabhupada's mission. And we work together happily, serving together because we understand what it means to be a member of the most important mission movement that's in the world. And at the present time, we know we're taking part in something really important to our spiritual master, to Prabhupada, to Krishna, to Lord Chaitanya. is a very important thing that we're doing here, and the key to making it work right, as in the early days, as it is now, as it is in Goloka Vrindavan, as it is eternally, is to work cooperatively and happily together to serve Krishna. And you see, the devotees do that. Like for cooking for a big feast, there might be 20 or 30 devotees in the kitchen, and they're not fighting and arguing with each other, trying to stay out of each other's way, but it's pretty hard in a small kitchen with like 20 or 30 devotees working there to not bump into each other. And you bump into each other sometimes. Maybe something gets spilled sometime. But it's not like, oh, you made me spill that, you idiot. That would be in the material world, in the kitchen. You stupid fool, you made me spill that cup of flour, or whatever it is. But it's not like that in ISKCON kitchen, working together to make a feast for the deities. And then in the pujari room, the devotees are getting ready for the abhishek and everything. And there might be, it's a very small room. Our pujari room is, there are many big pujari rooms in ISKCON now, but there weren't back then. Our pujari room is pretty small. But in that one pujari room at a festival time, there could easily be 15 or even 20 devotees all doing different services to get ready for the abhishek or whatever it is, and it's amazing how harmonious it is in this small room like that, everyone working together. That's the key to everything in Krishna consciousness. And and Prabhupada says, and Satsvarup Maharaj says here, with an esprit de corps, that's from the army. People in the army, they work together, and they're all like, yeah, we're all together, we're all in the army, and we're all doing this. So that's esprit de corps. And so we're like that in ISKCON too, but in a much more civilized way to serve Krishna. And Prabhupada is a phrase he uses here. They worked hard, but it was all recreation. And Prabhupada used that term recreation very frequently in his preaching. He said, there's no, sometimes he would say the devotees work very hard. There's one purport in the first canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, and there's one line in that which is in italics and for emphasis, and there aren't many lines like that in italics. And Prabhupada said there that one should work hard for Vishnu, and that should be one's motto in life. Work hard for Vishnu. So devotees, sometimes Prabhupada would talk like that. You should work very hard for Krishna, and Prabhupada worked very hard, definitely, for Krishna all his life. But oftentimes he would say, there's no hard work in Krishna consciousness. It's all recreation. Krishna, it's everlasting and it's joyfully performed, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. So we do work very hard in Krishna's service, but we become purified. Even now, the devotees go out. Vishnu Jana was leading the devotees out on Harinam for like 10 or 12 hours a day. That's not easy to do. I've never been on Harinam for more than 3 hours. And that's hard to do. It's going to turn off. On is on. not hard to do, but everything in Krishna consciousness, ultimately, immediately, is recreation. It's everlasting and it's joyfully performed for our spiritual master and for Krishna. And Krishna's service is fun. It's wonderful. First came to the temple, devotee asked me to wash the pots, and I didn't think, even in the material world, you think, oh, you want me to wash the pots? All right, I'll do it. But in Krishna consciousness, even from the very beginning, the way he presented it was really nice. He said, "Do you want to wash Krishna's pots? It's devotional service." And I was like, "Oh, okay, I'll wash the pots." And when I washed the pots, it was fun. It wasn't. It was nice. It was enjoyable. It was recreation. All service in Krishna consciousness is like that. Let's see. Prabhupada had been living in Los Angeles 4 months now, and almost since his arrival, he had been considering leaving. He regularly received invitations from sincere disciples inspired with the divine spirit, the impetus to spread Krishna consciousness. That spirit had led disciples to different parts of the world as missionaries of Krishna consciousness. And in those 4 months, it was in LA. I don't know for sure, but in those 4 months, there might have been 2 or 3 temples opened in different places in the world. Just one devotee or a husband and wife team going to Hawaii. They went just then, and he sent them to Australia. The temples were being started very, very quickly back then, and they still are. But there was definitely a pioneering time. New devotees would just pick up and move to another city or another country, another continent, and just, okay, we're starting a temple. How do you start a temple? Well, you get an apartment or a storefront, and you have kartals and maybe a mridanga, and you go out on the street, and you do Harinam, and then you try to get some money, and you buy some boga, and you invite people to a Sunday feast, and you give classes on the Bhagavad Gita as it is. And that's how you start a temple. And other young girls and boys, generally young girls and boys who came, and they'll join, and they'll be devotees, and then our temple will grow. It was very organic, as they say now. Very natural development is going on very quickly. And Srila Prabhupada, as the source of that spirit for his disciples, wanted to go be with them, to help them, and to strengthen whatever they had begun. He couldn't remain in one place very long. He had to keep moving, and like a flying, dancing spark, ignite the fire of Krishna consciousness wherever it would catch, and in as many hearts as possible. This spirit had especially manifested in Prabhupada since his return to America in December 1967. This was only a year later, December of 1968. His return to America in December 1967 after recuperating in India from his illness. The Krishna consciousness movement only really began, he said, after he had returned to the United States. When he had come for the first time, he had been successful in beginning centers in New York and San Francisco. He had seen that young people would take to Krishna consciousness. But then a heart attack had almost cost his life. He had at that time seemed a retired person returning home to India. But Krishna had somewhat restored his health and allowed him to return to America. So now, with a new aggressiveness and with much more deliberate, active planning, he would open as many centers as possible. At La Cienega, Prabhupada, that's the street in Los Angeles, La Cienega, Prabhupada had finally received a permanent residency status in the United States, recognized by the United States Immigration Department as an ordained minister of religion. And he was now free to come and go. So Prabhupada was eager and prepared to travel not only in the United States, but abroad. On Gaurasundar's invitation, he had been ready to go to Hawaii as early as December, but Tamal Krishna had pleaded with him to stay in Los Angeles and continue to inspire the Sankirtan party. In January, Prabhupada wrote to the devotees in London, "I have received a letter from a man in Guyana." Guyana is a small country on the northeast coast of South America, very small country. A lot of Indian people in Guyana for many generations. And he has invited me to go there. There is an invitation to go to Hawaii also, but above all, I am very much anxious to see a temple established first in London. Shyamasundar had written that Prabhupada's visit to London would be the biggest event in London since the time of the Roman invasion. Of course, from it's true, but from external vision, it wasn't quite that big. But from the spiritual vision, it was that big and more. Prabhupada replied, it would be the biggest event in London since the time of the Roman invasion. Prabhupada replied, actually, this will be so. This time, however, there will be no invasion, but if England is either in Manchester, Glasgow, or Edinburgh. But I guess those were manufacturing centers, and they would import things all over the world. But Prabhupada's London preachers had not even managed to establish a center. They had been forced by circumstance to live separately, the three married couples, in different parts of the city. They had no place for Prabhupada to stay. So Prabhupada planned to go to visit other places, but he was most eager to go to London and declared himself fit in health and prepared for any climatic condition in England. From correspondence with Hayagriva, now teaching English at Ohio State University, Prabhupada learned of their newly formed Krishna Yoga Society. It's a key element in preaching in colleges all over the United States, definitely, and probably other countries too, is you meet some students who are devotees or who become devotees who are going to a college, and they set up a club. Any student in any university can get a formally recognized club. That's been a big method of preaching all over, definitely the United States. Let's see. Prabhupada learned of their newly formed Krishna Yoga Society. Hayagriva wanted to arrange a program for Prabhupada to chant with Allen Ginsberg before a large group of students. Prabhupada told Hayagriva to set a date. He would go anywhere to preach. On February 13th, Prabhupada wrote to Krishnadas in Germany, I can immediately go to Germany. What is the temperature there now? The only problem is it should not be too cold for me. I am an old man. In February in Germany, it's cold. During February, Prabhupada also suggested that his French-speaking disciple, Janardhan, go to Paris and start something there among his scholarly associates. In Buffalo, Rupanuga had written Prabhupada of his successful student center and the 75 students regularly attending his classes in Krishna consciousness. He had started, this was in 68, and he already had I think, an accredited course in Buffalo University. And there were 75 kids taking his classes. Prabhupada wrote to Rupanuga, regarding your desire to take me there for some time, it is long overdue. And if the climate is suitable, I can go even now if you think it is necessary. Because Buffalo has one of the worst climates in the United States. They can get like 5 feet of snow at a time in the winter. But after the winter, the spring is good. Gradually, Prabhupada formed a full spring itinerary, considering the local climate as presented by you, he wrote to Kirtanananda in New Vrindavan. I think I shall postpone it until the end of April. Similarly, he promised Brahmananda and Satsvarupa to visit New York and Boston in the spring. From Hawaii, Govindadasi promised the end of the rainy season, the beginning of the mango season, and local interest in Krishna consciousness. So by late February, Prabhupada had a scheduled tour of about a dozen places, starting in early March with Hawaii. Okay, I'm going to stop there today. Anyone have any questions or comments, anything? We had one Russian lady here several years ago, the tall, thin one. Do you remember her name? No, she's been back in Russia for many years, but she grew up in Siberia. What? Trishakti, I think. Trishakti, yeah. And she would go out to Copley Square with her harmonium around her neck by herself if no one else would go. And she would chant and dance in Copley Square on the corner for like 2 or 3 hours, even by herself. For a while, we had a program here that we would go out on Harinam after the Sunday feast, like after devotees had taken prasadam, but not, and so devotees would gather in the front hall to go out on Harinam. And so it was winter and cold and dark, and it was snowing one Sunday night. It wasn't snowing hard, and it was cold. It was winter, but it wasn't that cold. And so Trishakti, she came down to the front hall with her winter coat on and her harmonium around her neck. And nobody else was out in the front hall ready to go on Harinam. And she said, like, where's the devotees for Harinam? And I said, oh, it's snowing. They don't want to go. It wasn't snowing hard, but it was snowing a little. And I told her it's snowing. She didn't want to go. And she's like, she grew up. She's like, you bunch of wimps. You know what a wimp is? Wimp is somebody, you're doing something that's a little difficult or a little dangerous, and somebody's like, oh, no, I don't want to do that. And his friends will say, you're a wimp. So she didn't use that word, but that was her attitude. She's like, tough and determined. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I know. She did that again. She was here a few months ago, and she did that again. Were you here then? Yeah, you were here. And I hope she comes again in the summer. It's very inspiring. Okay, all glory is to Srila Prabhupada. Ma Om Vishnu. Padaya Krishna Presta Guru Santi Satsam. Hare Krishna.